let's give everyone just a few seconds to come on in. Hey, we've got a viewer. Hey, welcome. How exciting. Fantastic. Okay, we've been getting this going for about 30 seconds. Well, let's get this show on the road, gang. Greetings, Houdini fans from around the world. It's 3 o'clock and it's Friday. It's time for Tech Art Talk Live. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host for today. Now, if you remember, a few weeks ago, we departed from our natural scheduled program in order to work on a little kind of side diversion. We have been working with dynamics, and one of my favorite simulation techniques is to use Houdini, especially the dynamics engine inside of Houdini, and use VAT or Vertex animation textures in order to bring in the animation into UE4 and then deal with it. And it's a really good technique, and I'm a big fan of it. But one of the big fans I'm not of is the import process. So last week I decided, hey, enough of this. I'm going to create an import script import into UE4 in order to import all of the VAT information into UE4. And we got through last week of bringing in all of the assets into the engine, and we got it working. Isn't that cool? So this week, I had to say, I did not finish it. In fact, it's taking way, way too long to get through this. But I'm glad to say that I am spending the time now in order to figure this stuff out and pass this information on to you so that you don't have to go through the pain and the effort it takes in order to figure this stuff out. But that is okay, but that's what we're doing here, and this is the reason why we do Houdini Secrets Live, so that you can learn Houdini as quickly and as fast as possible. And I didn't actually get all the way through it, and you'll see where we end up going with this, but I think this might be the last part of the segment because this is taking way too long, and this isn't really so much about Houdini as it is so much about UE4. Now, both are very important things, but this is Houdini Secrets Live, so I think I'm going to stick with focusing on more Houdini topics, and that's probably where we'll go next week. I don't know. I still have a few tricks up my sleeve, and then I might change things over, but I'm not quite sure. We'll just have to find out. Stay tuned for more information as I decide whether we continue this soiree or not. All right, well, let's get things started from where we left off last week and continue working on our little import script. All right, here's my system, and we are up and going again. And as we remember, we have this script called importvat.py. If you've been following along, then you can see the code is here off on the right-hand window. And on the left-hand window is my Houdini session, and I have the output log coming out here. And one of the primary contributions of the output log is the Python command window. Now, you can choose to use Python or the regular command, but for this, I'm just going to use the regular Python. And since it remembers the last command I did, I'm just going to kind of shift up, and you'll see that it says import VAT, and this is the location of my Houdini project, and then I'm going to send it to my destination. And so I'm just calling this, I created a character called guard, and then this is going into the guard location on the folder. And so I'm going to export this and hit enter, and let's see what happens. Okay, here's a problem, and I recognize what this is. This is like we got errors out the yin-yang. Okay, now if you've been doing this, you probably had these errors too, once or twice, I imagine. And the reason for that is, well, guess what? You tried to create a bunch of information onto UE4 that already existed. And it tried to load in a bunch of stuff that was already there, and it's going, hey, bub, you already created stuff that is already there. I don't like it. Don't want them. Go away. Okay, so the index, the telltale sign that this is a problematic is where it says index error array, index 0 is out of bounds for property import object paths. You're probably going, what in goody goo goo does that mean? Okay, ultimately, to make a long story short, if you go over to the content browser, go to your GURD folder or your destination folder, hit delete, and get rid of that, and then you see that that goes away. Now, if we execute our script, import VAT, okay, and then we have everything loaded up, and here's our GURD folder, and here's all of our stuff loaded up, and it is good to go. Okay, but this is kind of a pain in the butt. I don't want to have to go and delete this every single time. So I'm going to leave that on here just for proof of pudding here. And I'm going to expand our script to kind of do a little bit of preparation. So with that said, I'm going to, here is our import VAT project. And right above that, I'm going to, right before we go to the import texts and import meshes, I'm going to import, I'm going to say, okay, directory destination, that should be designated. Create a destination directory for the asset. So directory equals prepare directory. And here's our destination path. This is where one of the command line arguments that we did call our Python procedure from, and I want to make sure that this doesn't exist. So here he is, we're going to say prepare directory. Now we haven't written it yet, so let's go ahead and write this function. Now I'm going to insert this right after my, all right, there we go. And so here it is, prepare directory. Now the first thing I'm going to do is the input for this is the directory path, and so that's fine. So I'm going to create a local variable called udirpath, and this is going to say, all right, it's going to format, it's going to go into /game/ the name of my directory path. That's the name of my object. So first I'm going to check to see if the folder exists, and if it does, I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And so therefore I'm going to use the asset editor library, and then I'm going to ask, does this directory exist? So if.unreal.editor asset library does directory exist, and then I send it as a parameter the udirectory path. And if this is true, then I say, okay, then I'm going to remove the old directory. And so we're going to use the editor asset library yet once again, and we're going to say delete directory udirpath. And there it is. And so that's going to go and delete my old folder, if there is one existent. Then what I'm going to do is then I'm going to create a brand new folder in its place. So I'm going to say return unreal.editor asset library make directory udirectory path. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. And so this is pretty much saying, okay, if the old directory path exists, go ahead and nuke it, and then go ahead and create a brand new empty directory. So that's going to wipe out all the stuff inside of it. So let's give it a try and see what happens. We're going to push that in there. Then I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to call the script. Okay, so in spite of the old folder being in place, this went ahead and created a brand new folder. And there it is inside of the mesh. Okay, then we are good to go. So this will be an enormous convenience factor to make things go a lot easier. So let's go ahead and actually start building our materials. So as with everything, I'm going to create a call to, we've got my import textures, the import meshes. So now let's go ahead and let's create our VAT materials. So we're going to call it create VAT materials, And here's my destination path, because I have all the information I need in order to create that. So let's just go ahead and create the destination path. Let's go ahead and create the new material. And because I'm thinking more than one step in advance, I've got this create VAT materials. And yeah, let me get rid of this. This is a little bit confusing. Okay. Okay, so I send it the folder. I say go ahead and create VAT parent material to the folder. All right, that's good. And now eventually I'm going to go create the parent material, and then I'm going to create a material instance based on that. Now at this moment in time, I don't have a solution on how to get the Houdini values outside of Houdini and into UE4, but actually I kind of lied. I actually do have an idea, and if we go ahead and do this again next week, I'll give you an update on this, on how we are going to get the Houdini stuff into UE4 without actually doing it by hand. All right, so we've got, they're going to create the VAT parent material. So let's go and create a placeholder in here for this. Okay, so I have to remind you that we're going to be doing this for soft objects. Now, if you're doing this for rigid bodies or solid or rigid body objects, or if you're doing it for fluids, or if you're doing it for particles, then you'd have to write one of these drivers or one of these editors for all those separate objects. But they're going to be following the basic formula, and they're going to be basically all the same. And so here it is, create VAT parent material. And so I'm just going to put in a placeholder A equals true in here, just to act as a placeholder so it doesn't give me an error. So let's see if it goes ahead and creates the material, creates everything for us. So let's give this a try. Go ahead, save, and bring it up. Oh, okay. Uh-oh. I have his thing. Okay, it's looking for textures here. Yep. Okay. That did create some confusion as expected, so let's try that again. Okay, so everything works as fine. So now we can actually start fleshing out our create VAT parent material. All right. Now this actually took me some time to figure out here. And so what we have to do is we have to, first, we have to go and get some asset tools. Okay, so we're going to call that unreal.assetToolsHelper get asset tools. Okay, so this is going to give us some asset tools. I'm not quite sure what this does exactly, but we need to do this ahead of time, and we need to use all of our asset tools in order to create things with. And speaking of creating things, UE4 creates everything using something called factories. If you want to create any kind of particular object or node, you got to call up a factory for it, because it wrote, you know, some Python preprocessor scripts for you in order to make all these things for you, which is actually very nice, but very confusing if you don't know what the documentation is. So when you're looking through the documentation, look for factories. And since we're creating a new material, then we have to call up the material factory. And so let's create a new material factory object. Okay, so there we are. We say of our material factory equals unreal.materialFactory new. So that means we're creating a brand new material factory. And then I want to set the parameter for that to tell it, hey, once I create you, I want to go ahead and keep on editing you. Oops. We've got some long lines here. And let me go ahead and to make this a little bit more readable. There we go. All right, we can make a little bit more readable with that. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Let's put this into the wrong place. X. Okay, there we have our material factory. We're going to set the editor property to edit after new. We're going to set that equals to true. And then we're going to use that asset tools that we had just loaded up here. And we're going to tell it the asset tools, we want to create a new asset. And so we're going to give it the name. We're going to call it M. And in parentheses is the folder. So this is going to be like mguard. So it's short for material guard. And that's going to be the name. This is going to be the destination. And this is like inside of the folder that we just created. And then we have to send it what we're going to create. We're going to create an Unreal material. And for the information for that, we're going to use as kind of like as a parameter, we want the Unreal Material Factory New. So let me go ahead and read this. So when you're creating an asset, it takes 4 parameters. It takes the new name, its destination, the resulting type of object that it's going to create, and then finally it needs the factory object. You have to create a factory object, so you have to send it the type of material and you have to send it the factory object, because otherwise create asset isn't going to know what you're talking about. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save this and let's execute. Okay, no errors, so let's go check things out. And if we go over here to guard, we see that we have a brand new mguard material. Okay, this is good. We can click in here and we see that it is there. And it is, there's nothing into it because all it is here is we got the mguard material. And so it went ahead and created all that material for us. And so we are good to go. Now we have to configure our material in order to make it ready to pull in a soft VAT object. And in doing so, what we need to do is we need to set our tangent space normals to false, and we need to set the number of customized UVs to 5 because we need to, we are going to go ahead and create some custom UVs, and we are going to make sure that the tangent space normal is false. But that's actually really simple because all we have to do is once we've loaded in the new factory, then all we have to do is configure our material. And we do that by the typical way is we tell our material object, and then we do a set editor property, and then we tell it what parameter we want to manipulate. First, we want to set tangent space normal. We want to set that to false. And then right after that, we want you to do is set the number of customized UVs and set that to 5. All right, let me go and make sure that this works. All right, go in here, test it. Okay, and it does, ooh, it had to recompile the shader. So that means that stuff is working properly. So we are going well. So let's take a look at things. So here's our guard, and here's our guard, and we see that it's now black. Interesting. And look at that. We have 5 custom UVs in here. And if we look in here, if we want our tangent space, and we look and see our tangent space normals is false. Okay, so we are now configured properly to go and get things ready to rock and roll for bringing in a soft object. And so once we're bringing in a soft object, let's go ahead and bring in the material function. Now luckily, the material function for all of the VAT stuff is available already, but you have to go and turn on the Houdini engine. Now what that means is if you go over here to plugins, here we go, here's the plugins, and if we look for Houdini, make sure that Houdini engine is turned on. Now, in this case, I have a Houdini engine version 2. And if you're working with the new stuff, then probably you are too. But make sure that that is enabled. Make sure the Houdini engine is available, because the Houdini engine plugin has all the stuff already turned into us. So we don't have to worry about importing the material function from Houdini. We could just import it in from the Houdini plugin that's already exists for that. So that's already taken advantage of. So that's really cool. So with that, then we have to go through a bunch of more hoops, but hey, that's why we're here, gang, right? Okay, here it is. We've configured our material for the soft. So let's go ahead and pull in our function material instance. And so here this is kind of nutty. This, believe it or not, it already exists on disk, but it's not in the folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to load the asset into our UE4 session. And so we're going to go mf soft, so that means material function soft, equals unreal.loadAsset. And here is the path for all of the Houdini stuff. If you go in, check out, instead of /game, if you go /Houdini engine, /material functions, and here it is, /mfvat soft.mfvat soft. There it is. There's the path for the VAT soft material function. Hey, hey, there it is. We just loaded it up into there. We said, okay, good. And so here's the next thing. We're going to call our material function equals Unreal Material Editing Library. Okay, so material editing library. If you're doing stuff and you're making a lot of modifications with the material, you got to get used to using the material editing library. This is where it is all at. So we unreal.material editing library, and then we got to create a material expression. Oh wow, this is big stuff. So we hear this is a big line. So let me see if I can put this down below to make it a little bit more readable. Because I realize that my screen is a little bit shorter. But here it is. We're going to call unreal.material editing library, and the command to create any kind of material expression is create material expression, and then we have to tell it what the material we want. And so luckily we got our material when we created it. And then we're going to say, oops, this should be a U, unreal.material expression material function call. This is the data type that we are pulling in. And then here we have to give it the location. And so here we want it to go just a little bit left of our material and a little bit lower, just to make it a little bit more readable. So this is its location. So to make this a little bit more thorough, let's go through these parameters again. In order to create a material expression, you got to send it your destination location. Then you got to tell it, okay, unreal.material expression function expression material function call. And then you got to give it its location. And in this case, its X location is -350 and its Y location is +150. And then once you've gone and done that, once the material function has been created, then we're just going to tell it to use our material function that we loaded in beforehand. So we loaded our asset here to mfsoft. So okay, go ahead and set our material function to the mfsoft. All right. Let's make sure that this works. Oops, 156. Invalid, okay. Okay, we might have to, since this is for, it's not liking it, I'm going to have to move this one up to the line up here. Okay, so that one goes up there, so let's try this one again. All right. No errors. This is a good thing. So let's check it out. We go to our content browser. Check out our guard folder, and here's our guard. All right, there is our material function, and there's our Houdini VAT soft material function, rip roaring and ready to go, and it's already been placed for us to use to our benefit. Okay, fantastic. So we've got our material function in. So let's go ahead and start pulling in our textures. Okay, and then I realized, okay, textures. Great. Now we've loaded in all the textures, but I don't have any kind of information here to load in the textures. So I'm going to need to pull in my textures. Duh. Okay, so since I need to load in textures, so let's say, okay, let's load in textures. I'm going to click in here and I'm going to say, okay, give me textures. All right, and so we have to go back by the method that called this create VAT parent material, and it's right here. And so we're going to call that with textures. And then I'm going to put textures in here. Okay, now that one gets called all the way from here to create VAT material, and then we go textures. Okay, now we've gone through all the way back to the beginning of our script, and we say, okay, where do we get the textures from? Okay, so, well, obviously we have to get them during our import textures. So let's make sure that our import textures returns textures. So I'll go textures. Equals, no, that's a plus. Okay, textures equals import textures. All right, and so what we're going to do is go all the way back up to the top here to our import textures. And then here we go. So here we go, import textures. And then notice that here it is, we're loading in each one of our textures. And then here we have our texture path. And so this is going to load in all of our information. And so I'm going to start off by creating an empty sequence. I'm going to create an empty sequence. So I'm going to go texture maps equals open square brackets, close square brackets. All right, texture maps equals open square brackets, close square brackets. Not a problem. Okay, so we have our import, so here we have is our texture path, and then we get pulled in for that. And so here is, we're going to get the results from our import VAT texture. And so I'm going to say, all right, so I'm going to say text path. Text path equals, and then import VAT texture. All right, so can we do this? So here we have is our import VAT texture. Here is our function import VAT texture, and then we have configure VAT texture. So we got to make sure that we return our texture path 0. So I've got that. And so here we go, and we're going to go that, and we're going to return this. Okay, so we're going to return our texture path from that, and then we're going to make sure there's return there. So then all we're going to do is then append our texture maps with the texture path that was just created here. Okay, so there we go. Texture maps.append text path. So that means is we are putting this into the list. We're going to add our text path into our list. All right, good. We've got that going, so let's go ahead then and return our texture maps. All right, as with everything, I'm going to just test this to make sure that nothing else goes wrong, because something, this is a significant change. What I had to do is I had to backtrack all the way from my material all the way back to the main function and then backtrack to all the way back to the beginning of my import texture. So let's make sure that everything is working here. And hopefully everything is going correctly. I just want to make sure that there are no problems here. Oops. Textures is not defined at 166. So where did I miss out? 166. Textures is, oh, I misspelled that. Textures, okay. Let's try it again. Okay, so everything is now copacetic. We now have textures going into our create VAT parent material function. So we are now good to go. So let's go ahead and load ourselves in some textures. Now, remember that we had to go ahead and get the information about each of our textures, but so let's go ahead and take a look at what we have here. So how are we going to load these things in? Because ultimately we've got to load in a texture, and then once we load in the texture, then we got to hook it up to our material function. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this step for step. Do a piecewise meal. Do it slowly and carefully. Okay, I'm going to pull in the texture objects. Now, I'm going to just say here, why pause? I'm going to delete this for now. I'm probably going to regret that. But for all of my textures that I'm loading in, for each texture inside texture, then I'm going to say my text object equals unreal.loadAsset texture. Now, I realize that this is probably a bit redundant, but this guarantees that I have my texture object and then I'm ready to go ahead and use it. But once I have it, let's go ahead and bring in the node that contains it. Now, normally when you work on this, you bring in the texture object, you bring in your texture from the actual database or from the actual content browser, and you bring it in. But then you have to go and convert that to a texture object. Well, I couldn't figure out how to convert a texture to a texture object. So I said, well, why not just load in a texture object and then set the texture object to my texture? I said, ooh, okay, let's give that a shot. So here it is. Woo, this is another long statement. So here he goes. I'm going to say text me. So text me. So this is a material expression. Okay, you're probably going, what is a material expression? A material expression is any node inside of the material editor. Any node is called an expression or a material expression. So what we're going to do is we are going to use the material editing library. I told you we're going to be using this one a lot. And then we're going to create a material expression, just like we did when we were loading in inside of our material expression function call. And so this is exactly the same portion that we edited before. And so we're going to call create material expression, and we're going to use our current expression on that. So let me go ahead and return this to make it a little bit more readable. And so we're going to be loading in an Unreal Material Expression texture object, and here's our destination. Ooh. And we put -600 and ypos. And so what was ypos again?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
So I'm going to say ypos equals 0. And then here it is. And so this is going to stack all of my textures. I'm going to load them up from top to bottom over on the left-hand side. And so this is its destination. So as we did before, how do we load in any kind of node inside of a material? We use the create material expression. We send it the destination material. Then we have to tell what do we want to load in. And in this case, we're loading in a material expression texture object. And then we have to give its location inside of the editor where we want it to put it. All right, we've got that in there. So let's go ahead then and then tell it to use our texture object. Okay, then we have text ME, set editor project property, and so we're going to tell it to use the texture, and then we're going to load in our texture object. So it's going to use our texture object as we expected. Then we're going to update our Y pos, because I want my Y position to update every time we go through the cycle. So I'm going to go Y pos plus equals 200. Okay, so this makes sure that the Y position changes for every one of our texture objects. All right, we're moving along here. So let's go ahead and test it. All right, there we go. So here's our, there's our, and lo and behold, there are our texture objects, and they are all loaded up. We've got, in this case, I have no idea what I'm going to load. Remind you that we could load in multiple texture positions, we could load in normal maps, and we could load in color maps. And I don't really know what it's going to take, but we have to go ahead and hook all those up all the same. And so here is our normal map, our position, and our second position, because I wrote out double precision vertices out of this. Okay, so everything's loaded up. So this is all good. All right. This is excellent. So all that's left to do is start hooking things up. But then we've got a little bit of a problem here, because we don't really know how to hook it up yet. Okay, well, it's actually an easier situation, easier said than done, or easier done than said, actually. So I'm going to create a little go here. So I'm going to connect the textures. Okay, so every time I read in a texture, I'm going to connect that texture to the soft material function. And so here I'm going to create a function called connect texture to soft material function. And then I'm going to send it the texture. And then I'm going to send it the texture object. And then I'm going to send it the material function, because that's ultimately the three parameters that we need. Now, you could probably say, okay, you're sending it the texture material expression object, so you're sending it the node, and you're sending it the material function. But why are you sending it the texture? Well, it's because we don't know how to hook it up yet. We don't know which slot to hook it up to. So that's why I'm sending the texture information, because we're going to glean the information from our texture, and the texture is going to tell us where it wants us to pull it. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that function. And make some room for it. Whoa, another long. Okay, here it is, connect texture soft material function. And so we're importing in our texture material expression, and then our material function. And so the first thing I do is I create a dictionary. And I'm going to take advantage of my dictionary, say, okay, soft textures. Okay, we look at it here. Let's take a look on here. We look under here, the soft texture parameters, we're going to need input for texture position, or for the position 2, we're going to need a normal map and a color map. So we need to make sure that all of these are taken care of. So these are the ones we're going to prep for. So these are the entries that are going to be inside of my dictionary. So here the first one, say pause, goes into pause texture. And you're probably going, why pause? Okay, well, let's go back to take a look at this. And you'll notice that if we go into our material, let's look at the actual texture names. So here, we look at it, it says guard waving underscore norm. Okay, so that is the name of that texture. And notice it has an underscore norm. Here, notice this has an underscore pause. And this has an underscore pause too. Okay, so we can now have the texture tell us which slot it gets pulled into if we can go ahead and strip this last information out of here. And then we can use the dictionary to tell us where we want it to go to. All right, so here we have is pause gets hooked up to our position texture. Pos2 gets hooked up to our position texture 2. Norm gets hooked up to our normal map, or the normal map, and call for color gets hooked up to our color map. Okay, so then we have our destination dictionary. So this is going to tell us how to hook things up. So now we have to do is strip the texture type from our texture object. And so that is the next command here. And so texture type equals strip texture type. Okay, now this function doesn't exist. And so I'm going to, now I didn't have to create this to be a separate function, but I created this all the same. So I'm just going to stick with the script and avoid going improv, because whenever I go improv, things take a long time. So here it is. Actually, stripping the texture type is really simple from that. All we have to do is, here it is, I'm going to return my input texture, and then I'm going to use the string function that exists in Python called rsplit, and that means right split. That means from the right side, look for the first instance of the underscore. And then what that does is it splits this thing into two sections. It's going to split it into the first part of the string, and then the second part of the string after the little split point, or after the little underscore mark. And then say, why am I putting -1? Is because I want the last parameter. So there might be multiple underscores in here. There might be a whole buku of them. And I always want the last one. So in other words, I'm always going to take the negative first one. So I'm instead of counting from 0 and going up to the last one, I'm saying, don't even worry about that. Just take the last one. And so remember, in Python, it goes from starting at 0, goes 1, 2, 3. And then when you go -1, it starts at the end and starts going backwards. So I just want the last one. And so that's the -1. And so that's all that there is. That's all I'm going to return is the last one, and that's really all that there is. So let's go ahead then and connect our node. Ooh, another long one. All right, we're going to use the Unreal Material Editing Library again, and instead of, we're not going to create anything brand new, what we're going to do is connect a material expression. Okay, notice that there are a couple of connect commands inside of the material editing library. What we want is the connect material expression, is because we're hooking up to the actual material itself, and we are not actually hooking up more material expressions. And so we have to tell it, okay, we want to, okay, so let's get this going. Oop. All right, what we want to do is from the texture or the text ME or the material expression, and there's nothing on here. What? If we look at our, once again, if we look at our guard here, we notice that there's no text on here. So there is no texture. So there is no parameter name. So we're just going to use the default one. And I don't know how to call the default one, honestly. And so I just made a wild-ass guess, a wag, and said, okay, I sent it the empty string. I said, okay, let's see if the empty string works. And lo and behold, it does. And so we're going to go hook up the texture material expression to the material function, and then we give it the dictionary, so soft textures, and then we send it the texture type. And this is going to return one of these 4 results. All right, and so that should be good to go, and we should be rocking and rolling and ready to boogie woogie. Let's give this a go. No errors, and we have to compile. Woo, look at all that stuff it's got to compile. That's a good thing. Woo, look at that. Okay, let's take a look at all of our contents. We're going to guard. And it didn't hook it up. Oh, brother. Okay. So, oh no, what happened here? How come it didn't connect? Did I do something wrong here? So let's go check this out. Okay. Create VAT materials, material functions, connect source materials. All right. Unreal Material Editing Library. Okay, I obviously typed in something incorrectly here, so I'm going to go back and then retype this in. I'm not sure where I made the mistake.
Let me see if there's any close by. I'm sorry.
So I'm going to make this a little less readable.
The one closest by
So we got that going. So we got that hooking up, and we've got our Unreal Material Editing, connect material. Okay, we're connecting it. So let's go ahead and save this. Maybe I just didn't save this. And then I'm going to go ahead and re-execute it. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a shot again. We can go in hide the content, go and look inside our guard, and there's our guard. And there is all of our textures hooked up and hooked up. Now notice that they're all hooked up to the right positions. Okay, so that even though they came in an arbitrary order, we were able to hook them up to the right slot without any kind of problem. All right, very cool. So what do we got to do next? Well, if you'll notice that we have to make sure that there is a scalar parameter. What? Notice here that we have speed here. Now, what we require to go into, we have to create a scalar parameter to go into that. Well, that's not a problem here. A scalar parameter should be pretty easy to create, right? Because that's pretty much cookie cutter. So let's go ahead and see what it takes to go ahead and pull in one of these. Long stuff. Okay, so here we are. We're going to create our scalar parameter. All right, here we're going to call our nefarious material editing library, and we're going to create a material expression. And then to our material, what are we going to create? Okay, let me go ahead and move this onto the next line to make it a little bit more readable. What we're going to do is we're going to create a material expression scalar parameter. Okay, that's not so bad. That was a pretty easy one to find, actually. But we said, okay, we've got a scalar parameter. Let's go ahead and find that. So let's move this to -600, and let's move this above our textures. And then let's give it the name. So we're going to set the property for our scalar parameter. We're going to set its parameter name. We're going to set it's equal to speed. And then we're going to give it a default value of 1. All right, so now we're going to connect this material expression to our scalar parameter. And so this is just like what we called here earlier. So we're going to hook up our scalar parameter, and this actually, this doesn't have a name either. Even though the parameter name is speed, this still doesn't actually have an actual name associated with this channel. So I'm going to leave that as default. And so the material function goes into the speed slot for our material function. All right, let's give this a try. Okay, it's compiling more stuff. I'm going to guard. Here's our guard. And there it is. There's my speed scalar parameter. It's hooked up, and it's got hooked up to there. So we are good to go, and we are ready to rock and roll with this all the way through. Okay, the only thing left to do is then to hook up our material function to our material. All right. So actually, if we use the same convention here, it should be pretty easy, but instead of using connect material expressions, we have to go with connect material property because we are not connecting a material expression to a material expression, you know, a node to a node. We are going to be connecting a material property, and that is from there. Okay. And so here we go. We're going to connect the material editing library to connect material property. And then here we are. We're going to connect the material function. And we want the main, first we're going to do the color. Yeah, let's go ahead and knock this down. And we're going to knock that down. Okay, for readability purposes. Okay, for the first material function, we're going to hook up to, we're going to connect our material function, the color output. And we're going to hook it up to, now, because we are manipulating the material, it has, we're hooking up a material property. There is an enum that we have to follow, and we have to look under here under the material property enum. And for this, we want to hook up to the MP base color. And for the normal, we want to hook up the MP normal. All right, let's give this a try. Okay, it's compiling. It's not complaining. That's a good sign. All right, it hooked up our color and our normal just fine. Okay, the only thing left to do then is to hook up the world position offset to the world position offset, and then the custom UVs to the custom UVs. I'm afraid I failed you folks. I wasn't able to figure it out. I didn't have enough time in order to figure this out before the broadcast. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. I wasn't able to figure it out. I couldn't find how to hook up those extraneous material properties. Now you're probably going, well, why not just look for, why not just hook it up the exact same way? It's because you have to hook up materials in a very special way, and guess what? The enums for the material property don't cover world position offset or custom UVs. Go figure. And I don't know what those are. So I'm going to have to do some hunting and pecking and testing in order to give this a more thorough try. But I'm ready to abandon ship just yet. So what I'm going to do is, like, you'll notice that our material, it's got a little star next to it. It needs to be saved. So let's go ahead and save this sucker before we abandon it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave this for now. And so let's go ahead and save that material. And so what I want to do is, here's a squirrely part. What I really want to use is that editor asset library. And we used this before when we were creating our creating our textures and we're creating our meshes. So what we have to do is get the path for our material. Now, nowhere in here did I create the actual path for our material, because the material, it got created ahead of here, and this told us where to create the material, but we never actually formalized what the path is. So we have to create a formal UE4 path. And so I'm using, okay, Unreal Editor Asset Library, get the path name for my loaded asset. And so I'm going to say, oh yeah, okay, get my material, get its path name. All right, then I get the path name, and then I say, okay, cool. Then I can use the editor asset library .save asset method, and I'm just going to give it my material path, and then only if it's dirty, go ahead and save that regardless. And when it finishes, go ahead and return the material. So last but not least, let's give this a shot and make an attempt. Okay, it looks like it's going ahead and it went and saved a whole bunch of stuff for us. So let's look under here, go into our guard, And here's our mguard, and look at the star is gone away. So it has been saved, and it is good to go. And it's almost ready to go ahead and check out. So all we have to do now is by hand, we'd have to connect the world position offset and the custom UVs. Okay, so that is all that needs to be done yet. And what else? We need to create a material instance and then put in all the values. Now, I don't have a way of getting the values out of Houdini into this script, but I have an idea how. And I'm going to dork around a little bit right after this class to see if I can get the world position offset and those custom UVs to go, because I think I have a good idea on how to import those Houdini values outside of the VAT ROP. And if you're thinking what I'm thinking, we're thinking alike. So great minds think alike, right? That's right. So I don't know whether I'm going to show this or not. Stay tuned. Look for announcements. So next week, we are going to go and finish this importer once and for all, just to be thorough. Or we're going to return back to our dynamics exploration, and we are going to go through, there was a recent tutorial put out by Side Effects to cover the thorough explanation of how to do collisions. And collisions are super important when working with dynamics. So I'm going to go into and go through that module and really get a boot camp refreshment on how to do collisions the right way. So one of those two. All right. And before I let you go, I want to remind everybody that the Orlando Houdini Users Group is going to be meeting on the 26th. That's not next week, but the week after, Wednesday at noon. We are going to have Simon Verstrate. Good Lord, I'm sorry if I'm abusing your name, Simon. You rock. This is not a slight against you. I'm looking forward to having you with it, but I don't know how to pronounce your name. But anyway, Simon from Side Effects is going to come in, and he's going to give a presentation on world building on UE4 and using Houdini. Good stuff. Go to the meetup. Go to the meetup.com and check out the Orlando Houdini Users Group. Go ahead and sign up. It's for free, and there's no obligations. All you got to do is register for the meetup, and you'll get accepted, and then it will give you the Zoom link so you can drop in and come and join us for Simon's presentation. All right, thank you very much for spending the time with me today, and thank you very much for putting up with all the shenanigans associated with script writing. Hey, it's the wild, wild west, right? You never know what's going to happen. I love it. And I look forward to seeing you again next week when we're either going to finish the stuff up or go into that. So until next week, have a great week. Arrivederci. Bye.